Did we sell the idea well enough? Or
I think
do you
so.
think we still need to land the plane on why somebody might want to hear this?
No, I think it's good. And as we're talking, I'm realizing I don't now see this in any kind of linear fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I almost see it as like buckets that have to be filled up, or like, there's like in a video game or something where there's like like there's 4 levels and each one needs to be filled all the way up.
Mm-hmm. And
you can work on any one of them at any time. And in fact, you're always going to be continually working on all 4 at all times.
Right.
But you're probably going to be focused on one. Like you might be, I'm guessing a child, for example, at the age of 12 is primarily going to be growing up in their life. They're maturing. They're trying to figure stuff out. And we're going to get into this in a minute. I might have some more refined thinking in the next episode as we start talking about it. But, and then somebody that's maybe they've done a lot of work, they're going to be more in their contributor. I'm more in my contributor frame right now. I'm more in the show up frame. I'm having to show up so much that I actually need to go and attend to some of the other things. Like I need to probably do a little cleanup. Like I think, I've been kind of we've been doing a lot this summer up until the time we were this recording and everything. And I'm like a little cortisol, filled with like, I'm in like a high stress state because we've been running and doing a lot of stuff. I need to go and clean that up and be a little bit more chill and zen and kind of get some of those things in order. So, because I've been in such output, I've been showing up so much that you have to go and it's almost like you fill up the gas tank in some other way.
Right.
And I think you hit certain plateau or levels and you don't have to regress necessarily, but I think also the gas tank can empty out in some of this stuff.
Well, there's an aspect of humility that comes through doing that kind of work too. It's like, because we get really excited about a new level or a new territory. Like if we literally walk into a new territory, especially as NPs, it's like, there's new possibilities. It's excitement. It's like this new place. And I just want to stay here. But it's like remembering that in order to have gotten there, it's like this delicate house of cards that needs to be tended to in order for you to be able to stay there. So you just want to stay there all the time. And that actually ends up undermining you by trying to stay at the highest place that you could possibly get to. It's kind of like, again, with spiral dynamics, you could peak into the next level and it's like, I want to be here all the time. It's like, well, your center of gravity is not quite that.
Right.
You still need to kind of pull back, like you said, do some cleanup work or do some wake up, someone who is growing and they have a first wake up experience of like dancing on stage and you're like, I want to do this all the time, when really like they might need to go back into doing some sort of like muscle group developing, or they might need to develop some maturity so that they can, set up the shows for them to be able to do that more often or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've got this idea of inner and outer, you'd said. So that's one lever. And the other axis is collective versus personal. Is that what you said? Individual or collective? What's
individual collective.
So individual collective. So, and we can map these 4 ups to that model, almost like a quadrant, or is that too tidy to think of it that way?
That might be too tidy. Yeah. I don't want to get too tidy. I think it's, because the individual listening is really going to have to map this to what their experience is. Because I mean, grow up spans across interior, exterior, collective, individual, right?
Yes.
So it's like, where are you on the grow up? And then it depends on which developmental model you kind of become obsessed about, right? It can be spiral dynamics, it could be integral theory, it could be the stages model, the Enneagram, which I'll talk about in the next episode, like what those models could be. Okay.
So is there anything else people need to know, the listener or viewer right now needs to know before we jump into the next episode? Because I want to give them because next week we're going to pick up, we're going to go down into the grow up part. What else should we frame here to make sure we've got a good map legend for where we're heading?
I have a thing that comes up for me whenever we talk about this.
Yes, go.
I don't want to derail you, so let me know if I'm like going wildly outside of the reins.
No, my only thing is that just kind of an index of where we're going is like, we are going to talk about grow up, wake up, clean up, and show up. And we're going to be taking creative liberties about how we express that. So grow up, we're going to be kind of talking about accelerating maturity and growth and sharing some of these developmental models. Wake up is kind of like witness consciousness and what that means to wake up, like couple different ways to have wake up experiences, and then kind of what waking up on a more regular basis looks like with mindfulness or something like that. And then clean up being more ego focused, like ego, persona, shadow, self, that kind of thing, facing yourself, self-diagnosis. And then show up is the emergent process, that faith-based process. And then also all of the cleanup work of the 3 levels previously, what it takes to be consistently showing up to contribution, to presence, and to, frankly, a more adaptable persona.
By the way, we are starting something very new here at Personality Hacker. Now, you might be listening to this years from now, and so it's something that's gone on for a while. But as of the time of this recording, it's fairly new. We're starting up an experience of our podcast live once a week online in a virtual format. So what we're doing is we're gathering a group of like minds to come together once a week to watch this podcast together. And then right afterward, we have a membership program where people can come. It's called a personality quest. And we talk about the podcast right afterward. We unpack the learning from it, how we can apply it to our lives. And then we give the entire group of people that have gathered an assignment or a challenge for that week, some journal prompts and some reflection, but also a challenge that week to go test out in their real life, to go explore in the world. All of us are going to do the same challenge that week. And we come back the following week, we talk about it, unpack it, and we get the learning from it. And every week getting together to do this, we've already been doing a few weeks. It's been fantastic. I've loved doing it. It's awesome to see people come and gather live to watch the podcast, talk about it, and go do challenges in their own lives. You should be a part of this. If you're listening or you're watching, we want you to be part of it. Currently, we're doing it on Sundays. You can find out more information to be part of Personality Quest if you come over to personalityhacker.com/quest. And you can learn all about the quests and what we're doing there and get yourself involved, because I think you're going to love this experience, especially if you've loved the podcast and you love personality types and personal growth and the intersection of those two things. It's one of the things that I am super excited about going forward with. So, and there's going to be some live elements to that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we've got planned around this. But right now we're just starting with these weekly gatherings, and I'd love for you to be involved.
Yeah. Okay. So you said the thing that I was going to say and you wove it in all of that. So apparently I'm not going to go too far outside the territory line.
Great.
There we go.
But to weave this in, there's two things coming up for me. The first one is that I recently heard somebody who we follow say, do you want to understand your problem or do you want to solve your problem? And it really struck me because I'm an understand things kind of person.
Yeah.
And
Dun, 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 dun.
and so the
hashtag NTP problems.
Exactly. And so I think that as we go through this, if we can point out all the ways, because that's actually, to me, that's like that's the ultimate spiritual bypass, is hyper focusing on understanding something and not actually moving into solving. And we can get really good at tricking ourselves into believing that our level of understanding all by itself is going to move the needle. And so we just have to understand it more. And this is an understanding a concept podcast series.
Right.
So if we can bring it back to like, okay, and then how would one use this to solve? I think that would be really good.
I just want to make one comment to that. I think I think it's well intended. The reason why people listening to this, and even us, lean toward the understanding part is because probably if you're listening or watching right now, you don't see your life or challenges necessarily as problems. You might see your life as something to be optimized. So if I can understand it, then I can optimize it. So the problem challenge, like the problem solution framework, I think I don't really buy that anymore. I don't see problems in my life. I mean, I do, but I the moment I reframe those to how can I optimize, it immediately reframes it from a problem. So I think people are outsmarting themselves. And so that's kind of why they don't focus on solving the problem.
Yeah.
It's like we need to kind of go back to the unsophisticated way of seeing it like that.
Yeah.
Like it is a problem. We have to find a solution. And then we can upgrade that to say, actually, life is a game to be optimized. It's not a problem to solve ultimately.
Right.
Yeah. Because both are simultaneously true, right?
Correct.
And it's like, which one is the more helpful for him to come from at any given time?
So I just want to make that comment.
Well, and then to piggyback off what you just said, the other thing is that, and we've said it a million times, or at least I've said it a million times, the best prescription comes from the best diagnostic.
Yeah.
So there is something to be said for really understanding what's going on here so that you can prescribe the best solution. The challenge is just never getting to prescription, just getting so knee deep or hip deep or then shoulders deep. And then now you're submerged and drowning in understanding and diagnostic. Then you never actually get to solution. So I think that's something, I'm just keeping my finger on the pulse of, do you want to understand it or do you want to solve it?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, Ken Wilber talks about that as like the difference between kind of the spiritual talk versus the spiritual walk. And in the sense that he's using the word spiritual as like a discovery of the self, not in like a high-minded kind of way, but just in this like intellectualizing, which is, again, we need to learn and we understand and we need to have tools and all of that stuff. But it's one thing to optimize yourself as like maybe a physical presence, for example, but then you don't show up to a party to hang out with your friends.
Yeah.
Like, and having the experience of actually being amongst people and communing with them and contributing or whatever the case may be. So it's like oscillating between the two is where things really start to become beautiful experience for people.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's coming up for me is you mentioned it, and we've talked about it in, I don't remember what the podcast episode is. You'll find it and you'll put it on the editing thing.
I'm sure I will.
But we talked about the different Jungian archetypes of the self, which is the persona, which is our interface with the outside world. It's when how we decide we're going to present ourselves to others, and what is our access point going to be. The ego, which is our relationship to ourselves and how we see ourselves. The shadow, which is anything that we don't really either want to or just simply don't have access to seeing directly. So we have it be reflected back to us. So that's the shadow part of us that is us. We're just not seeing it. So another way to say it is what we're unconscious around. And then the whole self, which is the whole enchilada, right? All the parts of the self, which include those three and then more. And I think keeping those concepts in mind help understand when something is an outer game, an inner game, a combination of the two, right? And so I think throughout this, it might be good to have our finger on the pulse of like this might be both inner and outer world, implication. And that's usually persona work. Persona work is inner and outer simultaneously, which is why it's hard to master. So that's something that I might end up weaving a little bit in here just as a frame of reference. So when you said, do we understand this completely? That's like a model that I think I might end up throwing out there a couple times. So that's the only thing I was going to add to your question of, do we have everything we need before we move on to the first topic?
I think the last thing is like, you may be looking at these, after we complete this series, you might be looking at the titles and you might be, you might encourage yourself to skip steps or, go straight to shadow work because that's what you're obsessed with.
Right.
But it's really building layers of a cake. And I think you would really be of service to yourself to, after you listen to this one, to go to the grow up episode or whatever we end up naming it next, and then follow the order. Cause I think that would really be the full experience of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. They build on each other.
Yeah.